Hi, welcome to a deeper look, unpacking the K-12 arts education visual arts objectives. What you are about to see was part of a larger 8-webinar series in which we spent 1 hour on the objective through lines of the two standards under each of the four artistic processes: connect, create, present, and respond. Because those live sessions included time for breakout discussions, I've edited and combined them into one 60-minute webinar for each of the artistic processes. This webinar is on the respond objectives and combines content from the two live sessions, first discussing RE.1, followed by the session on RE.2 objectives. If wishing to receive CEU credit for your participation, you will need to complete a reflection journal. You can use this link here, or the link can also be found in the PD catalog. It will force you to make a copy. Then at the completion of the webinar, make sure your share settings are open and upload your completed reflection into the CEU survey. This is what it looks like. It's actually a bit longer since, again, this webinar combines content from two earlier sessions. Feel free to pause the video so that you have time to fill in your responses.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. This is Unpacking the K-12 Visual Arts Education Objectives, and we are here to unpack today the RE.1 standard. And today is Thursday, November 20th, and it is 4 o'clock, so let's get started. Oops, go back. That was me. Okay, if you have not met me yet, I'm Dr. Laura Stotterman. I am your dance and visual arts consultant with the Department of Public Instruction. My coworker is Brandon Rader, and he oversees the music and theater components of the arts. And then we are supervised by Dr. Lori Major Carlin, who was a former theater director herself. So the three of us are your arts ed team, highly accessible. We're here to support you. We value you. We appreciate you. So please know that you can reach out to us at any time with any questions that you may have or needs. All right, so the purpose of today is to assist you to implement the RE.1 objectives. And again, that's the Respond Strand objectives of the 2024 Arts Education Standard Course of Study in Visual Arts. Now, remember, this is called the 2024 standards because that is the year that they were adopted. We are no longer referring them to as the essential standards because that term was specific for the 2010 standards. So anytime you refer to this, it's just the new SCOS or the 2024 arts education standards. Our intended outcomes today are for you to have knowledge of the first standard of the Respond strand and the two objective through lines for visual arts. For you to be able to identify all the support resources that we've been building for you in ways that you can unpack them, and to get into those lesson breakout rooms where you can exchange those ideas and make connections with other educators in the grade bands that you told me you teach. So again, if you told me K-8, we got a room for you, and hopefully there's people here for you to talk with today. If you get into those rooms and no one is here, then please bear with me for a moment. Again, I am working a little bit differently today, only on one screen, so it may take me a little bit longer, but I will move you into a breakout room where there are other individuals that teach at least an element of your grade band. So just give me a second when we get to that part. All right, so remember, anytime that you do any of these types of trainings, you want to make sure that you are archiving this in your portfolio for your summative evaluation with your administration at the end of the year, because this is saying that you know the content that you teach and that you are aligning your instruction with the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. So this is preparing you in knowledge in ways in which you are going to build those lessons for students to show mastery. Our agenda is always the same. I'll take a deep dive into the standard and the objectives. So today, again, RE.1. I'll talk briefly about using backward design and how it was created to support you all in understanding what those end goals are, and how do you then use the unpacking documents to build standards aligned lessons. We'll take a look at the additional resources that we have available for you, and then get you into those breakout rooms for your standards to lessons. Typically, it's about a 15 to 20-minute conversation that you'll get, and then I'll bring you back into this main room where I'll close out with you for any other additional questions. All right, so let's get started. RE.1, remember that there are 4 artistic processes. We are now, regardless of your artistic discipline, dance, music, theater, visual arts, we're all looking at this same artistic processes of either connect, create, present, or respond. And so here we are at the end of this webinar series, looking at the last strand of respond. So what does respond mean? It means that we're having students analyze and evaluate how the arts communicate with their audience. So this is when they're looking at art, right? And really trying to digest, like, what am I seeing? What did the artist intend? How did they use the media and tools? What am I seeing within the application of techniques, right? And really being analytical and then also like evaluatory. So we're in RE1 in this first objective, we are purely analyzing the visual artworks. We want to make sure we're looking at them from a variety of styles, cultures, and genres using content-specific vocabulary. It's really important that we put that element of content-specific vocabulary in the standard because, again, we want to stress that arts teachers are constantly teaching literacy to our students, right? And these is a vocabulary bank of words and knowledge that they would not be getting in math or in science, right? It's specific to visual arts. And so ways in which you're teaching students to use that vocabulary when they're looking at artwork and discussing it. So now every standard has two thematic through lines, right? And these are the themes that carry from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade so that or advanced. So we see this continuity of knowledge that we are trying to develop. So our first through line is that we want students to identify skills and techniques that are used in the artistic works, right? Again, what did the artist use? How did they do it? What am I seeing as far as the application of skills and techniques? And so that essential question that drives that inquiry is, well, what did the artist present? What's there on, in the work? And then that enduring understanding, or the why, that's that overall knowledge of like, well, why is this important? What do we really want our students to understand and know? And from this through line, we want them to understand that the techniques and elements in visual artworks can be objectively identified and analyzed. That means that you, myself, the students sitting next to us at the table, we're all going to look at the same piece of artwork and we're going to come up with the same answer, right? This is not about interpretation in this first through line. It's what do I see, right? And so we may have, like, you may notice things differently, right? I may notice a color first and you may notice texture first, but we're all going to be in agreement of what it is that the artist has done with the skill and techniques. Then we come into RE 1.2. And now here's where we're starting to make some interpretations, right? So we're looking at that intent and the purpose behind why that art was created. So our essential question that drives this inquiry again is, why did the artist make these specific choices, right? Because what students could then realize is, oh, if the artist did it like this and the reason for it, then maybe that's something that I'm going to want to make that same decision in my artwork so that I can arrive, to my audiences in the same way. Or I don't want to make the same decision that this artist did. I want to do something totally different. So by understanding some of those choices, our students are able to make their own choices in their own art making. And so our enduring understanding, again, the overarching, why is this important? What do we want students to know? We want them to know that an observer's interpretation of a work may align with or differ from the artist's original intent. So what I'm seeing, all right, I'm going to bring a lot of my own personal experiences to my interpretation, and that may or may not align with what the artist had intended. So let me try to understand, what did the artist intend, and then also how am I responding to that? All right, so let's take a look at the actual objectives. So again, this is our first through line. Our theme, our strand, right, analyze and evaluate. Our standard is to look at the work and analyze it, right, objectively. And so we're seeing just what are the skills and what are the techniques. So here's our K-5 continuum, right? And so we see that in the very beginning level at kindergarten, they're just identifying the media. What's there, right? What is being used? Is it clay? Is it canvas, right? Is it acrylic paint? Like, what am I seeing that is making these specific artworks? And now we start to describe. Remember that the verbs are important. So it's not that the students are making this art, but they're having to talk about it and they're having to describe how it's made. Like, what are some of the processes behind it, right? What are the ways in which this media is being used, or these tools or these skills are being used? And then we're going to start classifying. And I want you to notice that such as landscapes, cityscapes, skyscapes is all in italicized, because really That shouldn't have been included. I'll be honest. We were told that like the such as is the examples of that goes in unpacking documents. So we know that in second grade, it is likely that you're going to be teaching students landscapes or cityscapes, right? Portraits and still life. So that got in there, but you don't have to do these. You can classify art into any kind of category in second grade. The such as is just given to you as examples of what you would likely have your students classify artwork in doing. Okay. All right. So then in third grade, notice this is the first time that we're going to see a conjunction and. So if you've been with me in the previous webinars, when we talk about and, it means that students must do everything within that objective. So they're having to identify the skills and the techniques. Now, that doesn't mean that in one evaluation, they've got to talk about both things. Maybe in one classroom activity, you're just looking at the skills that were used. And are the skills different from techniques, right? In ways in which it's happening. Maybe, maybe not. This could have been a place where they've used, the writing team has used skills and techniques kind of like synonymously, right? But to make sure that you understand anytime there is an and, that the student must show mastery of the entire objective. Whether you do it all in one lesson or you break it up is up to you. All right, so in fourth grade, we start classifying our North Carolinian artists in terms of style, genre, or movements. And so now we see the conjunction or, and that means that the teacher, you have the autonomy to decide, do you want your students to be looking at the style or the type of genre, or do you want to really have that conversation more about the movement and what art movement it came from? So that's just dependent on you and your lessons, the unit that you're designing. Or at this age, if you wanted to even give that autonomy to students to do, maybe they're a little young for that, for classification of that level, but you know your students best, right? And so as long as they are able to do one of the things, right, either style, genre, or movements, then check. You've done, they show their mastery. Okay. And then in fifth grade, they're now looking at American artists. And remember that this aligns very beautifully with your CN standards, right? Because the fourth grade is all about North Carolina. It's aligned to your social studies standards. And then in fifth grade, we're going wider into the United States. Okay. All right, and we get into middle school. We're starting to analyze. So we're coming up that Bloom's taxonomy, and we're looking at subject matter and movement and styles, looking at historical periods, right, identifying characteristics, and in eighth grade, identifying those elements in art and principles of design, how it's used to differentiate the movements, styles, and themes in art. In high school, we take a backward step because remember I say we, the writing team, of course, were of individuals from across the state that wrote these. This is not written by Brandon or I. We just guided the process, but I'll still say we. So the beginning level is meant as an introductory year. These are students who should be coming to your programs with very little, if any, prior knowledge, right? And so if kids are coming into your high school levels having taken a K-8 continuum, then you should be scheduling them to be working on the intermediate standards. That's a whole other webinar. We can talk about it later as far as placement. We're not saying that you've got to put them into the classes with your higher level students that have already been with you. You can still have that foundation level course, but they should still be working at intermediate level scopes, not beginning level, because the beginning, again, is written for students who have 0 to very, very little background knowledge. All right, so we're going backwards in bringing them back in for the first time. We're looking at that the elements of art and principles of design, right? We're building on that and seeing how they're starting to be visible and suggested. So what are you seeing? What's kind of suggested here as far as those viewpoints and themes? And then we're making comparisons in the last 2 honors levels. Okay. All right. So remember that these objectives were written to be intertwined. We want you to teach more than one objective at a time. This is not the type of course where the principal comes in and says, put your objectives on the board. And you're like, but I'm teaching all of them. There's not just one, right? A good solid unit is going to have multiple touch points going back to connect, going into create, going into present, going into respond, right? And several times of that throughout the entire artistic process. So we've created this diagram for you. If you haven't seen this before, you can choose either like that interwoven one on the right-hand side or more of this swirling whirlpool we called it the cinnamon bun of knowledge because it's really easy to digest, right? And so all of these things are going to have that swirling touch point as you're bouncing back and forth into the different objectives. So RE 1.1, the ones that I just presented to you, have a good solid pairing with CN 1.1, right? Because like I said, in fourth and fifth grade, you're already talking about the art that exists in North Carolina or in the United States. And so the kids are going to be looking at that art. So why wouldn't they be using these objectives in Respond when they're looking at it, right? So that is an absolute pairing that you're going to want to make in your lesson plans or as you're looking in the design of your units, okay? And then how can you use these to then maybe launch into create, right? So first you're evaluating, you're introducing this artwork, you're looking at it, you're talking about it, and then maybe of course the kids are going to create their own project that's going to be based on something that they've seen or that they're learning about. And so think about how you're making those touch points, and then of course they're going to present on it, right? And then you go back into the present objectives. So you see that interwovenness happening. All right, now we're going into 1.2. So now we're into our second objective through line, right? And this theme is that we are now making interpretations. What is the intent and what is the purpose of this work? So in kindergarten, we're starting to just look at those symbols and themes in different ways that communicate meaning. And it could be something as symbolic as like snowflakes for winter, right? And so it doesn't have to be like these massive, very advanced, complex themes. It can be something very simple, leaves for fall, right? And so it's just very simplistic in ways in which you're getting students to recognize that images carry meaning. How do you explain that they are used to communicate meaning? So now students are having to make this explanation. So that's a verbal, or written skill that they're having to do. Identifying the story in a work of art. What do you see? What is the artist trying to tell us? And then how to describe it. Notice in third grade, now we start citing that evidence. So, well, what made you think that? What do you see in this work that is bringing you to this conclusion? And how do you then in fourth grade make that inference of like inferring that meaning? In fifth grade, we see that my interpretation might not compare with my neighbors, and that's okay. We want to teach students that we come to art and appreciate it in many different ways, and there's never really a wrong way to appreciate art, right? That we bring ourselves to the experience, and that's the beauty, I think, of what we do. All right, so in sixth grade, we start to make speculations. Why do you think the artist did this, right? So what do we know about the artist? What do we know about the media? What do we know about the time period, right? And so what are some of the things that may be happening in society at that time? So again, you're making connections to CN1 and talking about this as it exists. Describing the visual literacies and personal experiences. How do these influence the interpretations? So now we're centering more on the student, right? Who am I? And how do I bring my experiences into my world of observation? And then seeing how now the artistic choices in eighth grade could be influenced. So we're going back into those CN standards and understanding who is this artist, what's happening in the world around them, what is their culture, what is their environment, and how are those choices then, impacting what's being made and how it's being made as an artist. All right, when we get into high school, again, we're stepping up. We're coming into those higher thinking skills with analysis, right, or analyze and synthesize, still interpreting, looking at the historic and cultural context of the visual artist or styles. Again, you can pick, or you can have the student design their own project, and they can pick how they want to show mastery of this objective. And then in advance, it's looking at, well, what does the artist intend and what's the purpose of it from what I can find out, right? And then how does that compare to what maybe an audience might think? So maybe they're reading reviews, or maybe they're just talking about it in class. And what are ways in which maybe, again, it aligns or it differs from what somebody perceives of a work based on what they know of it, right? Because obviously when you have very little knowledge of a work, you're not going to have that same like in-depth understanding. And then as soon as you learn more about something, you're like, oh, of course, I see that now, or I understand that. And so it's teaching students too that education about art and like how work was created, why work was created, when it was created, who the artist is. It helps us like to inform our observations and to have a higher level of appreciation for the work. All right, and again, we're intertwining. Everything is woven. And so what do we see? How do you pair even the RE 1.2 objectives with the RE 1.1 and CN, right? So how are they're having to analyze, they're having to look at what the skills and the techniques are, right, in order to make these interpretations. And so that's a natural pairing. And then I've already talked about how you're going to circle it back to some of your Connect standards. And so I want you to start thinking about those as you take a deeper look. All right, so using backward design, and this is where we get you into that deeper look. What is backward design? It was used to write the standards. This was the framework that we had given our writing teams. And basically what it's research and work that's done by Grant Wiggins and Matee, and it's about the standards are your end of course goals. Right. So when you do other professional development, they're like, oh, we want you to come up with what students should be able to know and do at the end. We're like, well, that's already written for you. It's called the standards. So this is what students, again, you're trusted to how to scaffold that learning and get them on that journey. I talk about the vehicle, right? The vehicle that you drive your kids in or that they're driving themselves in. That's local control. We just are identifying the end goal, and that's what the standards are. So if we know that the standards are the end results, then how do we determine what acceptable evidence is? Well, the unpacking documents do that for you, right? They were designed to really support you in unpacking and understanding what is standard aligns work that is going to support this journey. And then you're going to plan those experiences and that actual instruction because you know your students, you know your resources, you know how much time you get with them in the classroom, right? You know your obstacles and you know the things that work really well and what is relevant and meaningful that's going to ignite that intrinsic motivation of your kids. So we trust you and it is locally determined. All right, but this is again to show you that if stage one, kids need to meet the standards. They have to understand the concepts. They got to demonstrate the skills and they have to thoughtfully consider that essential question. Then in stage two, the question is, well, I need evidence of the students to do what? Right? Well, you need to say, what do they need to know in order to do this? And what do they need to be able to do? Okay? And that's the knowledge and the skills. So now it's your turn to play along with me. And so at this moment, I would like for you to take either your phone or type in another browser bar, go.ncdpi.gov/AE hub or hyphen hub, right? And this is our AE hub. You should bookmark this page. This should be like your best friend, your top resource that you go to. This is where everything is housed and found for you. So I'll give you a moment to please go here because it will be more meaningful for you if you're actually following along in a document that makes sense versus just listening to the presentation. So go.ncdpi.gov/AE hub or AE-hub. And this is the menu that you should see. I will say we got rid of the crosswalk and we replaced it with the parent guides. And so it might look, that one little button is off, but the rest of it is all there. All right, so going on if I can. Okay, so we want you to go into unpacking documents and pick the unpacking document for visual arts, right? And it'll take you into what will look like this. This is an example of a 7th grade, but go ahead and click on that button for unpacking documents and then it'll look like this. It'll say, oops, go back. It'll say unpacking documents and click the one down below for visual arts. And then it should take you into a table of contents for your grade level that you pick. And please select either RE 1.1 or RE 1.2 for today's webinar. Okay. So give you a moment just to get there. And again, disclaimer, it should pop up in a minute that these unpacking documents are here to support you in designing standards aligned lessons. We want you right now looking along with one of the RE 1.1s or 1.2 pages of a grade level you teach. But what you're about to see on the slide of the images, it actually is using an intermediate PR 2.1 objective. So these just the topic is there of what I'm going to talk about, but the actual detail of the text is not. So don't look at my screen for what is actually like written in the document. Follow along and read what's written in yours. Okay. All right. So here we go. Hopefully you've all gotten there at this point. All right, the very first thing you should see on top, it is not highlighted in green. This is just a way for me to show you where you're looking, but this is where you see the actual objective. So again, in this on the screen, my sample is that it is an intermediate PR 2.1. You should see the verb bolded. Pay attention to the verb. That's what the kid has to do, right? The kid's got a verb. So if they're choosing, if they're creating, if they're identifying, if they're explaining, right? That's what you have to assess. Okay. Pay attention to the conjunctions. Do you see an and or an or? Right? And then think about, well, I might want to do this, or I might want to do that, or I have a way to do all of it, or I'm going to break it up. I'm going to chunk it. So they're going to do this part of it first and this part of it second if it's an and. Okay. All right, the next part you see is the glossary. So although we have separate glossary documents, we've gone ahead and taken every single term that we had in our glossary and we've put it here for the teachers so that you don't have to go to a separate document to see what that terminology is. Now, these are adult written terms, right? These are not necessarily student friendly terms. So you can always rewrite them, right? Run it through like a chat GPT, make it, applicable to a grade level you teach. But this is here to support your knowledge, okay? Next, the vertical alignment. We have a vertical alignment document. It'll show you how the entire through line progresses from kindergarten through advanced, but this here is that snapshot that's going to show you what did students do before this grade level and what are they doing after this grade level so that you understand to stay within the scope. And that's what, when you hear us say scope, that's what we mean, that you're really giving them those challenging tasks that are appropriate for what this through line is and what this objective level is, right? So making sure you didn't do something that was done before and that you also know where you're preparing them to go next. And likely, as you are going to be the teacher of that, right? Because for the most part, you're going to have them K-5 or you're going to have them 6-8 or through high school, right? Then you understand where that next level is going to design to. But if you're passing them off to another school, then it's really important that within PLC conversations you start having reaching out to the schools above and below you to talk through, like, hey, what is this going to look like in your grade levels? Let's make sure that it's appropriate for the scopes. By the time they come to me, or by the time I get them ready for you, this is what they're going to be doing, right? So that's that great conversation that you can have within PLCs within your district. Enduring understanding. So that's that overarching why is this important? And this will be the same statement for all grade levels in this through line. So again, if you're looking at an RE.1 or an RE.2, it should read exactly the same as I presented earlier on in this presentation. And that would be the same regardless of the grade level that you're picking. That knowledge, here you're going to find a couple of bullets that will help to understand what the students really need to know in order to master this objective. And so it's not getting into the details of what you're teaching as far as like what media you're using, which artist you're focusing on, but it's more of that overarching. So we took the objective and we just peeled back those layers and we said, what do they really need to know in order to show that this mastery? And so that's what you should find those bullets there. And it should also include the conjunctions as well, making sure that if the objective had multiple touch points of things that it has to do, then you should see that written out in the knowledge. Skills, you're going to find one or two bullets. The first bullet is going to take the objective and give it a sentence stem for the verb. So, for instance, in this case that you're seeing on my screen, the verb was to choose. And our sentence stem that we were using for choose is to consider and select. So anytime you see the word choose in an objective, it should start off that way because you're understanding that students have to make considerations and then make selections based on those considerations. And then it'll take whatever the rest of the objective is and just maybe reorder how it's written or phrase it just a little bit differently, hopefully to provide just another level of clarity. Then you might have a second bullet, and that's going to tell you that the students are using disciplinary or academic vocabulary, right? Because again, we are stressing that teachers teach literacy skills. And so ways in which students are having to either write, read, recite, right? Ways in which they are using this vocabulary in order to do the thing. And so that would be a bullet there that just helps you to advocate again for yourself in ways in which you're using literacy in your classroom. All right, evidence of mastery. So this is a common statement across every art form, across every grade level, across every standard. And it's saying that it is the teacher's responsibility to collect evidence of mastery from every student. Now, in visual arts, this is not often too challenging because your kids are usually working individually on projects. Sometimes they might collaborate on a mural or maybe like just kind of a co small group type of project. But usually, even within that, you can tell like who's doing what and how much their input is happening. But this is really written more for our larger ensembles because we want to make sure like you can't just say all kids mastered this because you got a superior at at a performance rating, right? And so this is saying that you have to find ways. The assessment does not have to be this huge thing. It could be exit tickets. It could be pair share discussions. It could just be you're walking around the classroom and you're having one-on-one quick little, chats with students and you just keep a little clipboard or something and you go through and you're making a check that they made the connection. They're answering, they know the knowledge, they know the skills, right? So does not have to be time consuming as far as a lot of grading is concerned. Because again, it's not the level to which they're able to do it. I found as a teacher, that's where I really got hung up, right? Is this what grade level is this going with this rubric versus, well, did they do the thing, right? So are they doing it? That's just a simple mastery check. Okay, key elements or key insights. So this is going to show you some really strong suggestions of you should think about pairing this with this objective strand, or this may be the first time students are learning this type of language or looking at this type of work. And so it's just kind of peeling the curtain back a little bit to give you that behind the look of things that could help you to better deliver this instruction on this standard. So take a look at what your key insights are saying, and maybe it'll even spark some other ones for you. All right, but now we get into what is completely yours, right? And this is going to be in the classroom. And so these are suggestions only. This is locally determined. It is not, we're telling you you have to do these things. But the teacher actions, the way they were written is more of a template, right? Of just good pedagogy, things that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to provide examples or maybe collect your materials first. What am I going to use in order to launch this lesson, and what resources do I need in order to sustain the lesson, right, for it to happen? You're going to design those learning activities, right? What do I want the students to do? You're going to have to, make demonstrations. You're going to show the kids. Either you're going to show them, like, we're going to do this, and this is how you do it, and I'm going to teach you, follow me, right? Or watch this happening, and now go try it on your own. And then even from there, give them, bigger wings to use that skill and that technique in their own creative voice, right? So trying not to do a lot of copying, but at some point we've got to teach them the basic skills, and that will require copying of like, do it this way or this is how it can be done. You're going to provide those learning opportunities. You're going to guide their process, right? You're going to monitor their progress, and you're going to make assessment. And formative assessment is one of the key, like, elements of intrinsic motivation, right? If you can give really good formative assessment that's positive in nature, that really shows them where they can like go next and gives them some really tangible ways in which they can make improvements, the kids want to be good, right? And so the more that you're able to engage with them throughout that artistic process, the more buy-in those students are going to have with you. And so think about, how are you giving feedback throughout the process and not just waiting till the very end when they've got to turn it in for a grade, although that's important too. Okay. So those are all your teacher actions. Again, these are just suggestions, and you'll be building a lot of your own as well. Then you get the possible learning activities, and these are not prescriptive. These are just, I call them the springboard into the pool, right? And so we just want to launch you into some possible ideas, things that'll get you thinking, and ways that you may, again, have already been teaching these objectives or have ideas of your own. So these are just some ways that you could potentially explore these things. All right. So remember, with standards aligned lessons, the very first thing is, what is the verb? The kids must verb. So although we want them to create art, if that's not the verb, right, then you got to go back and peel it back. Are they identifying? Are they describing? Are they explaining? Are they analyzing, right? What are we really wanting the kids to do? And then look for those conjunctions. Are they ands? Are they ors? How does it fit within the unit? Do you have multiple units for this objective, or are you able to package it together, right? Are you making the decision, or is a student making decisions if it's an or? Looking at that scope, staying within the lane of it being grade appropriate. And then what is that assessment? How are you able to give, especially that formative assessment throughout the process versus the final end grade, of course, which is important too, but that's summative evaluation, right? So we're making connections, right? So I want you to look at the one pagers. I want you to go back into the resources to really pay closer attention today when I put you into these breakout rooms of how can I start now that we're at the end of the series, and hopefully you've been with me. How can I start pulling back the knowledge of what these other objectives are and making more holistic plans that are going to bring my students through this journey of teaching multiple objectives throughout my lessons, right? Because that's the way you're really going to get them to show mastery, because they have repetitive practice in doing the things. Okay. So again, that is found in the AE Hub in the Unpacking button, and it's here for you. go.ncdpi.gov/VA quick guides is where you'll find that. Using the unpacking documents, take a look at those, right? What are some of the things that you're reading in those in the discussions? Okay. So the one pagers and the quick guides should be your resources. So I'm going to throw you into those breakouts. Question, right? How can you pair these objectives with especially CN 1.1? You heard me talk about it. What other connections can you make? Optimistic closures new today. I gave you a different one to throw you up a little bit if you've been with me. These are also great to kind of use with your students. So where did the webinar shine some light? What still feels cloudy? Or what idea had like kind of struck lightning? So if you want to throw that in the chat, it's always fun just to see where other people are at. I love reading them.
All right, today is Thursday, December 4th. Somehow we have made it into the last month of the year. I don't know about you, but the older I get, it seems that the months just fly by faster and faster. But here it is, Thursday, December 4th, and we are unpacking the K-12 Visual Arts Education Objective, the sponsor 2. I am Dr. Laura Stotterman. If you have not been with me before or met me in person, I am your dance and visual arts consultant at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and my coworker is Brendan Rader. He oversees music and theater. We are supervised by our second, who was a former theater teacher, and so the three of us are always accessible to you all. Please do not hesitate to ever reach out if you have questions or needs, because we love connecting with the field. The purpose of today is to educators to implement the RE.2 objectives of the 2024 Arts Education Standard Courses of Study in Visual Arts. Our intended outcomes are for you to leave tonight with knowledge of the second standard of the Respond strand and the 2 objective through lines for visual arts. Remember that a through line is that we are scaffolding these skills and knowledge from kindergarten all the way through the advanced level, right? And so we see this thematic idea that's building from grade level to the next. We are going to identify those support resources for unpacking the visual arts standard course of study and get you into those breakout rooms where you will have an opportunity to exchange lesson ideas and make connections. Remember to make sure that you are recording all of this in your notes for all of the professional development that you do, because this is to be shown to your administrator during your summative evaluation to show that it supports standard 3, in which you know the content that you teach. You are aligning your instruction to the North Carolina state standards, and these types of professional development opportunities are evidence that you are doing so, right? Taking time to learn about them. All right, so here's our agenda. It always looks the same. We will start with the RE2 standard and objectives, sharing those by grade level as we go through. We'll take a look quickly at backward design and the unpacking documents, having you go into the AE Hub and pull up an unpacking document for one of the objectives and follow along as I read. And then look at those additional resources and get you into those breakout rooms from standards to lessons, and then end with you tonight. So let's dive in. RE2, the standard and the objectives. We are in Respond, right? And this is when we are having students to analyze and evaluate how the arts communicate with their audience. So again, this was the same standard as our last webinar together. or the strand, I should say. But now our standard is RE2, and we are now evaluating visual artworks using content specific vocabulary. If you go back through all of the places where we were intentional about mentioning literacy in our new SCOs, right? This again is advocacy for you that we teach literacy in everything that we do. And so we were very cognizant of how can we make sure that we're making that obvious to administrators, to stakeholders in our language, in our standards. And so knowing that you teach that content specific vocabulary, and we want our students using the terms and language of their art craft, right? This is important. So our two through lines. The first through line examines the effect of personal preference. We can't have students analyze and respond to art objectively without understanding that, part of my bias, part of my own identity, my preferences will play a role in how I perceive art. And so we want to bring awareness to our students about what are those biases, what are those preferences, how are they formed, and how can you kind of think beyond them and have a greater sense of appreciation. So you might not like the artwork that you see. You might not hang it on your wall or choose to do a project in that style, right? But you can still look at it and appreciate the work for the way in which it was crafted. And so we want them to understand how personal preference can play a role in what they're seeing and experiencing. And so our essential question is, how do personal preferences influence responses to artwork? And that understanding why, that's going to be threaded again from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade or advanced, is that an observer's personal experiences shape the way that they perceive and engage with visual artworks. Our second objective through line is now we are evaluating that artistic work and we are providing feedback. Now, the word feedback should sound familiar to you, and that's because we looked at feedback in application of it when we were talking about the present standards, right? So this is called a sister objective, and you're going to see that later on when I present it. We purposefully wrote this objective through line to partner with PR, right? So that when students are giving feedback in class or self-evaluating their own work, right, or receiving teacher feedback, then they're going to be making that application of the feedback using their present objectives. So the respond is that I'm giving it, right? I'm letting you know the strengths, the weaknesses, areas for growth. So the question is, how can feedback be given to self and others? We want students looking at their own work. We want students looking at the work of their peers, as well as evaluating professional work, right, and writing critiques or just giving responses as well. But it's really important that they're shaping each other's learning in their classroom environments. And so the enduring understanding is providing feedback through objective critique is imperative in improving artistic practice, right? So it's not just, oh, I like this. Oh, I really, I thought that was nice, right? That's great, but what do you see, and how can you be more objective in how you're giving feedback to your peers? And so we'll take a look at all that criteria. All right, so here we are in our first through line. Again, we have our strand, our standard. The through line theme is looking at personal preferences. So in our elementary grades, we just want students saying, well, can you describe what you like about a certain work of art? I like the colors. I like the animals that I see. I like the texture, right? Or whatever they're looking at the shapes, right? The themes, whatever they're looking at these early levels. Then describing why it's personally appealing, expressing those preferences. So here we see the elements of art, right? By second grade, we're definitely having students use their content language vocabulary or their discipline level vocabulary to talk about the elements of art that they're enjoying and that they're seeing. And this could be in their own work, this could be in the work of their peers, this could be in a work that you're sharing with them. So notice if it's not saying what they're looking at, then you have the discretion to use what it is, right? Express preferences, compare personal responses to a work of art at different stages. I really love this one because fourth grade, if you did not know this theory, that fourth grade, there's like a fourth grade slump basically that happens. And that is students are highly creative up until the fourth grade. And then it's at this time that research has proven that students start to really pay more close attention to like their outside influences and the work of their peers and judgment. And so we tend to kind of see kids take a step back. And so we may be seeing students struggle a little bit more with their levels of creativity, with being able to like accept defeat or failure at small increments, right? Well, I don't like this. It didn't work, right? Okay, well, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. How can we make improvements on your art? What can we do to make it better, right? Instead of getting frustrated and saying that it's no good. So we see that in fourth grade, we want them looking at how do you feel about the art when you're first starting? How do you feel about it as it's happening? How do you feel about it at the end? And hopefully by that end, right, they have a real sense of pride and accomplishment and a sense of efficacy. And so think about how you can talk with your students throughout the creative process at that level. And then in fifth grade, they're defending those personal preferences for particular works of art. We come up into middle school, they have to justify what they see as far as what the appealing qualities are. They're comparing those personal preferences so they can compare, like, well, I feel like I like this in this work, and I like this more when I'm looking at this type of work. They can also compare with each other, right? So within the classroom, you can have peer comparisons. And this is teaching students that not everybody has the same appreciation for the same things. And that's okay, right? And so we're seeing that we want to foster that idea that art is for everybody, but not everybody is going to agree on what they find appealing, right, for their qualities. Okay, so then they're describing those personal responses to visual qualities in works of art in eighth grade. When we get into the beginning level, and remember that these objectives are written for students who have not had a K-8 continuum in visual arts. So these standards are to be given to students who are pretty much fresh coming to you in your programs. You can still have your entry level courses, but they should be able to work at the intermediate level in those foundation courses if they have already come and have proven a K-8 development of these skills, then the beginning ones may be too elementary for them, right? Because again, we were writing them really for the students who've had no background. But still, we're talking about what do you see, how do you respond to it, that personal aesthetic. And now in the honors levels, we're starting to understand how society and culture and identity is really shaping a little bit of those aesthetic responses, and then justifying what those preferences are, acknowledging the influence of history, society, culture, and commercial art. Remember where we see a conjunction and, it's important that the student has the opportunity to show mastery of everything within that objective by the end of their time with you. So for advanced, as an example, the student should be able to talk about history, society, culture, and commercial art as to how those have shaped the personal aesthetic preferences. Now, whether they do all of that in one response or you have them pinpoint and look at different ones throughout their course of study with you, that's up to you, right? But by the end of their time, all of those should have little check marks over them that the student has been able to draw that relevance for how that is shaping those aesthetic preferences. So remember this, if you haven't seen this, I don't know if, again, people are with me for the first time, just looking at some of the names. I do believe, again, we've all been here, but this is that cinnamon bun of knowledge, right? That swirling interwoven design that shows that we do not teach these objectives in isolation. And so how can you pair RE 2.1 with, for example, CN 1.1 and other respond objectives? So if you think about CN, right, that's the connect standard, here's where you're going to be showing students and having them find works of art from other artists in history and cultures, right, and regions. And so they can then be looking at those, of course, and giving their preferences of what they see, what they like, right? And so you can pair those quite naturally. And then with the other respond objectives as well, because surely maybe they'll be giving feedback, right? And so we'll see how that can connect to the ones that are coming up after this. But our idea, especially now that we are in the last webinar, is to really go back and start seeing how can I make these connections, right? We don't have to do more. You're almost in a way doing less, right? Because you're able to interweave them together. You're able to kind of have them all have those multiple touch points within a lesson or a unit. And so you're really able to bring that cohesive learning to your environment. Okay. So the next one that I'm going to talk about, I already mentioned it at the very beginning. RE.2 objectives were intentionally written to be paired with the PR 1.1. In PR 1.1, students are applying feedback to improve their techniques and skills, right? And so in order to apply the feedback, they have to get the feedback. And so that is where the respond objective 2.2 comes in. And I've written it, if you were in one of my earlier webinars where we also had this, I think it was in Create, right, where I was showing you how the improvisation or the experimentation in CR 1.1 can naturally lead into your Create objectives with 1.2, right? So here we're seeing where I'm layering it. So on the left, we have RE 2.2 and how it sisters or pairs with our present standard. So in kindergarten, for instance, we are providing positive feedback for personal art. Well, we have to learn how to give positive feedback. And how do we do that? Because we're going to be listening to our instructors, right? They're going to listen to you, provide examples of positive feedback. So the focus is on using that positive feedback to improve our work. So in the PR strand, we've focused on the instructor, but we would hope again that you're modeling that for what they can do and then have the student practice in giving their own positive feedback for their work, right? Where we see the word personal, it's not talking to their peers, it's not talking about something else that they see from a different artist, it's of their own. In first grade, right? Positive feedback for personal and peer. And so we come over into first grade on PR, and those students are improving their art based on that positive feedback from instructors and peers. And so here you see that peer element happening, right? We're going to talk about it in the classroom, and then we're going to go back to our workstations and make those improvements based on what our peers have shared. In second grade, we start getting into the constructive feedback. The standards writing team, again, they were teachers from across the state in visual arts, K through 12, right? And they felt it very important that those elementary levels, first and kindergarten and first, were only positive. But by second grade, we're able to start now having a little bit more of constructive feedback, right? So it's positive, but also, well, here's a way you can make this improved, right? And so we're looking now, how do you improve that art based on that constructive feedback? In third grade, we are looking at specific criteria to construct feedback about art and composition. So now we're really getting a little bit more nitty gritty of what we want the students talking about. And so in PR, we see that they have to make improvements to composition and skills. Fourth grade, self-evaluation, and PR self-evaluation. Fifth grade, it's in orange because this one is a little bit not as similar in its language, but you can definitely still make those connections, right? But we're looking at, let's identify what do we need for our criteria when we are evaluating different types of work based on their styles, their genres, and the media in historical and cultural contexts. Well, you see the word historical, you see the word cultural, and where are you going to go? Right on back to your CN objectives, right? And how can you sister this one then, knowing that students are working on their CN objectives, learning about art, right? And you're going to pair that with this one here. And then in fifth grade, they are making changes based on self and peer evaluation. So we're taking what they've learned K through 4 that's still happening in the classroom. We don't stop giving peer and self-evaluation just because it's not written, right? Something you probably are always doing. So it's written there for PR. But fifth grade, it does take a bit more of a back step, like a macro vision, right? To look more holistically at what criteria do we need to make sure we're including in our evaluation when we're looking at this work. Okay, in sixth grade, develop that relevant criteria to evaluate a work of art.
Sixth grade objectives were also written as students may be entering programs for the first time. And so it seems a little bit repetitive or redundant of fifth grade, a little bit more simplistic because we didn't talk so much about the historical or cultural context, but we would anticipate that you would still be having those conversations with students. So what is the relevant criteria? What are you having students do? And therefore, what do you need to measure within that project? And obviously you're going to be teaching the elements of art, the principles of design, especially at that entry level of middle school. And so in sixth grade, they're improving those things based on the feedback. It's likely that your criteria, your relevant criteria, is going to address the elements of art and the principles of design in whatever project you're doing, right? Seventh grade, given criteria. If you see the word given, it means that the teacher is providing it to the student, or it could mean that a peer has designed it and given it to the student. But typically, if you'll see peer generated in that terms. So we really do feel more that given criteria is teacher directed. And self-generated. So the student has to look at that work and say, these are the things that I want to measure within my art, right? These are the things that I want to look at. How well did I use these tools? How well did I demonstrate these skills in what it is that I am making? And that could be different for different students in your room, right? Depending on how much autonomy you are giving your students within their projects based on a theme or based on the material or the media, right, that they're using, kids may have different criteria in what they're looking at their work, the lens through which they're evaluating their work. And that would be great. So this is a way that you can definitely broaden that scope to give that autonomy to your students. Okay, we get into high school, critiquing work based on given, self, and peer generated criteria. And we see the PR is to revise work based on given criteria. So it doesn't mean that they won't still use their feedback from self and peer generated, but it doesn't perfectly match with the PR objective other than the given criteria. Now, remember with the and, maybe it's one work and it's being evaluated both with given, self, and peer generated criteria, or this is 3 different projects throughout the course of study. And the first time they're using given, the second time they're doing peer generated, and the final time it's student self generated, right? And so that's up to you, so long as by the end you can put those check marks over the entire objective that the student has mastered all of the content. We're critiquing personal artwork or the works of others with self-generated criteria in intermediate. And so with an or, you have the opportunity to decide which part of the standard you are doing, or you can let your student decide based on what kind of project they're working on or where their energy is. In accomplished, we're looking at critiquing a personal body of work and using given and self-generated. And so in accomplished, we're looking at those justifications of why I made those revisions. And it's based on that formative or summative feedback. And so see how they would connect. And in advanced, we are critiquing personal art, considering relevant traditional and contemporary criteria, as well as the personal artistic vision, right? What did the student, what was their vision for that work, and how well did they achieve that goal? And so in advance, we are having them revise that artwork for their collection or portfolio. So again, the language may not be perfectly matched as we've seen in the others, but you can still make those strong connections between these two objectives, okay? So that's just to show you the side-by-side for how this one can pair with PR. And again, we see that interwovenness. What other objectives can RE 2.2 be paired with? And that's, again, when we're saying anytime that they are creating, anytime that they are looking at other artwork, right, and having to evaluate what they're seeing, that could definitely have those connections. Remember, when we check our alignment for any lesson plan that you are doing, look at the verb, look at the conjunction, look at the scope, and look at that assessment. How are you giving feedback throughout the process as well as at the end? That, of course, is going to mirror what that objective is. All right, our additional resources, our standard course of study is found in the AE Hub. And so this is showing you the strand, the standard, and the objectives on the side. Our quick one-page guides are a fabulous resource when we're talking about that connectedness. This is where we want you to go so that it's easy to see all the things that students are having to know and do within one grade level. And then you're able to, again, kind of draw those arrows and make those connections. Oh, I see that I can easily pair CN 1.1 with a CR 1.2 with a PR 1.1 with an RE 2.2 in this unit. Boom, done, right? And okay, in this unit, I can pair up, the next one, maybe a KCN 2.2, looking at art with digital tools or media, right? And I can then have them create based on that. They can be analyzing that with an RE 1.1. So all the ways in which you can see how you can interweave these objectives in your units. Your crosswalks show you the new standards to the old standards with a side for notes, should you just choose to use this or print this one out. And so standard is left to the side and the objectives are underneath with their little arrowed bullets. And if it is new, as in this example in the screenshot here, then this does not, and this, I think this is a dance one if I'm looking at it to be, or maybe this is theater. Yeah, this is a theater one if you're looking that closely. But if it's new, it meant that it didn't exist before, right? And so you would have to come up with some new lesson plans for it. All right, vertical alignment. This is a dance one just in the slide itself, but our vertical alignment is for all disciplines, right? And it shows you there the through line, how it develops from kindergarten all the way to advanced. But I love these. This I created specifically for you all for visual arts. And so you have it by grade band. You can look just to K5, just 6, 8, and it shows you the strand, the standard, the through line theme, the essential question, the enduring understanding, and then it has how those develop within that grade band. So if I were in the classroom, this is definitely going to be what I have in my binder or, printed out along my bulletin boards or something for me. And this is all found in the AE Hub. Horizontal alignment, we do have some music folks joining us today, and this is where you're going to want to live when talking to your visual arts friends, right? Especially at the elementary level, because you want to see what are we teaching our students, right? They're going to come to me for however many weeks in a semester or in a year, and then they're going to be going and either piggybacking on this information or maybe teaching the exact same thing, right? Just with different disciplines. So where you see no highlighting, for example, in second grade, that means the language is exactly the same. And so there's other than just, your own artistic discipline. Otherwise, where it's highlighted, it might just be phrased a little differently, or it could be something totally separate, but at least it gives you a great understanding at a glance of what each other are having to do with your students at each grade level. The glossaries, we have a common glossary, which is everything. If they were in 2 or more disciplines, we've got them in the common glossary, but then we have individual glossaries after that. So again, we made it easier for you by putting all the good terms in those unpacking documents, so that really this may not even be needed, but all the terms are there for you. But so check the common one first and then go into the visual arts one. And yes, you can always make the essential questions more kid friendly. Absolutely. And ChatGPT can do it for you even. So save time and definitely use your technology. Our parent guides are located in the AE Hub. And so these are documents that you can also build off of. That are more specific to your own classroom, but it gives an overview to the parent of what the kids are doing within both objective through lines of each standard. And so, and then all the ways in which they can be supported at home, taking them to local festivals and museums and having conversations about art, creating little galleries for them to display their work, so on and so forth. Professional development catalog after probably by next week. Now all of this series will be loaded for you. We've got all of our copyright series. We have other things from the past. And so if you are still in need of your CEU credits and you want some extra things, definitely check this resource out. Make sure that you are using the correct reflection journal and the survey at the end of the presentation, and then you would upload your link to your reflection journal, and then the CEU credit is, the certificate is sent to you, and then you have to turn that into your LEA. Okay? So this is not something that we handle as far as like licensing. We just give you the certificates. Oops, I just clicked the wrong thing. Okay. If you did not know, when we first revised our standards, this was the framework that we had different webinars on. So this is more holistic for everybody, but they're great resources. It's just that we talk more for like dance, theater, music, and visual arts all in them. But here's my series, and it is, again, all you can click now when I send this out later, the Connect, Create, Present. They're all there for you, and Respond will be loaded up by next week. If you missed copyright and creativity, it was a great discussion that we had, and that is now archived in our PD catalog, and you can get CU credits for it. On Tuesday, we are meeting with Swank, and they will talk about when we show motion pictures, or we're going to use motion pictures within our teaching, whether in trying to do it in entirety or in clips. What are the right and ethical uses of these resources? And so they'll be giving us some guidelines to enhance arts instruction. This is a free webinar, but I really want you guys to come back next Thursday, December 11th. We have a killer presentation for you all with the art of education. We hear you for CR 2.2 talking about the ethics and copyright, and they have done a great job giving specific classroom examples and ways and all of their resources that support it. So this is one that you will not want to miss. And if you do have to miss it, then just make sure you go into the PD catalog and check it out at a time that's more convenient for you afterwards. And you will get the slide deck later on this evening, so you can just click on these buttons to register, and they are free. Make sure you are following our listserv. It's probably going to your other inbox, but don't miss it, especially as we're about to end these sessions. I want you to stay up in the know for the things that will be coming forward to you in the spring. So definitely look for these and open them up every month. And also your teacher, you should be getting those teacher slides from your district leader every month. So hopefully you are, and if not, drop me an email and I can try to troubleshoot as to why you are not receiving them. But that's another way that we're trying to make sure our teachers feel seen and supported, knowing all the great things that we are trying to do to connect you and get you all the resources and help you need. All right, so it is now time to get into those breakout rooms, and I want you, again, for about 20 minutes, trying to make the connections now, right? Which way do you, so it looks like you're sharing videos. Do you include, oh, that's something else. Okay. How can you start seeing where those connections will happen for you in the four things? So one way to do that is with those quick one pagers, right? So pull up a grade level, and maybe you're looking at that in your breakout room. You've decided to all look at sixth grade, for instance, right? And have conversations of where do you see those connections. The unpacking documents, obviously they're there to help you as well. So make sure that you're looking at those especially when you get into some of the ideas, right, that you can spring off of, and the knowledge and the skills section. You can work smarter, not harder, pairing all of these things together to create really great lessons for your students. This out. Hopefully you had some good conversations. Let's go ahead and close up so we can get out of here tonight for you on time. Optimistic closure. Again, something where maybe this webinar shined a little light for you tonight. What's still a little clouded, and maybe there was a new idea that struck like lightning. So pick one, either the sunshine, the cloud, or the lightning.
Thank you for watching this webinar. I hope that you found it informative. Here's the link for your CEU survey. Make sure that you have your reflection journal link open for anyone to view, and you will be asked to upload it into this Google form. As always, thank you. We're here for you. Please reach out with any questions that you may have. We look forward to hearing from you.